Okay, so we will just wait for 1 second while Zoom and Facebook communicate with each other. But very excited to be chatting with you, Hilary.
Thanks for having us. I have a couple of questions for you after this is over.
Okay, perfect. And I think it is live. So let's go ahead and get started. And worst case, I will use this recording to post it. So Hilary from Free Geek, thank you for joining us today. So excited to talk about the digital divide.
Thank you so much for having me.
So first, I guess, would love to know how you became interested in the digital divide. It's not something that people just wake up necessarily caring about, but it's definitely an important issue. So what was your digital divide story?
Yeah, I actually grew up pretty much digitally divided. I was a military brat for years, and when my parents left the military, we moved to the country, and in the area where I lived, there wasn't regular internet access. And I didn't have a computer in my home for most of my childhood, and didn't have a computer when I went to college. And I remember walking into the university the first day and recognizing that everyone else had a laptop and I did not. And I felt a lot of shame about it. And I also felt really uncomfortable because while everyone else was doing their schoolwork during class, I couldn't do that. And yeah, I remember feeling a lot of shame and a lot of discomfort around it. And I had to learn to type much later in life than most people do. So all of those things kind of combined. And yeah, I started caring about the digital divide pretty young, accidentally.
Right. Yeah. No, it's an obvious story to why you would care a lot about it. I mean, thinking about how integral it is to have a laptop now when you're just sitting in class typing away. Obviously, professors and teachers prefer when you're using it for good things, like actually getting your schoolwork done. But to also think about how cumulative those experiences are, right? You missed out on that window of just getting to mess around with a computer as a kid and getting that typing experience, for example, as a youngster, and now having to play catch up. That's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, I also remember that there was like this interesting knowledge gap around things that people were experiencing on the internet that I wasn't experiencing. So like a lot like AIM culture was a whole thing, right?
Oh,
so
gosh.
When I was younger, people would talk about like, oh, like we're talking on AIM with our friends tonight. And I was like, oh, like I can't do that. Like
right.
I don't get to be a part of that. And it was this thing where I regularly felt very excluded, and I didn't realize the cumulative impact of that until I was older and had like missed out on a whole set of cultural references
right.
That are way less important than a lot of the things that people don't get to experience today, but they're still there. So
right. Well, and so thinking about this digital divide and obviously how it's grown and become even more important right now, can you talk a little bit about the scale of the divide you're seeing in the Portland area? I know OPB earlier was reporting that thousands of students were without computers and without the connectivity they needed. Where do we stand now, and how is Free Geek trying to address this divide?
Yeah, I mean, Free Geek is one partner in a sea of many that we need to solve the digital divide. We saw an initial need that amped up really quickly. So we got, I think OPB reported initially that we went from 300 requests per month to about 3,000 requests per week.
Wow.
That we were getting at the beginning of the coronavirus. And that slowed down a bit, but we still are getting a lot of requests for computers. And I think the reason that it slowed down is because we simply can't meet the need, and people are hearing that. So they're trying to find computers elsewhere, which is sad. We don't want that to be the case, but it's also the reality that we're living in.
Right.
Yeah, the issue around the state of Oregon, we've been told by Oregon Department of Education, is about 75,000 students that don't have devices. And then there's also, of course, the issue that you're really well versed in, which is the internet access, right? So a quarter of Oregon students, they're saying, don't have the internet that they need in order to connect to school. Some people are using cell phones or hotspots, and they're really quickly running out of data, and that's not good either. So It's a complex issue. Um, Free Geek is one partner in a sea of millions trying to come together to make this work. And I see that partnership not only being us as like a device provider and a connector to potential internet services, but also like we have, corporations who are stepping up to get us the technology we need. We have individuals who are stepping up to get us the technology that we need. It's really a wide range of people who are trying to solve this problem. And I will say for the first time, I don't know if you were aware of this before COVID started, but I used to do fundraising drives where I'd say, hey, like, will you help us get computers to kids who need them? And I would regularly hear back, a computer is a privilege. It is not a right or a necessity at all. And I'm not hearing that anymore, which is
Right.
great.
Good.
Because it's always been a necessity. It's been a necessity since we started using technology to engage in education. Like 2 years ago, I interviewed an 11-year-old who received a computer from us. And she told me that she hadn't been able to get the same homework as all the other students because she didn't have a device. And she, explained to me like her quizzes were different, her homework sheets were different, everything that she was doing was different. So most of the kids had this like interactive homework space that they were working in. And she was taking home paper worksheets, which is totally different. So I think as long as we're requiring students to engage in that way, it is a right,
Oh, it has to be. Right.
Yeah.
And the idea that, oh, well, just use your phone, right, is an excuse that people used to have. Can you imagine applying to a job on a phone and having to scroll down and try to type out an entire cover letter on, I don't know, T9 even, right? You may not even have an iPhone. So trying to go through just day-to-day life now, especially in a COVID world, it's impossible. A device is a right.
Oh yeah. Well, for me, I've become a lazy typer with my thumbs, right? Like I don't even like long text messages. I try to get things done as quickly as possible. And like sending an email from my phone that's more than 2 sentences is like not something I'm doing.
Yeah.
But we regularly hear from students that are saying, we're typing term papers on our phones, we're trying to Zoom from our phone, like we're doing all these things from our phones. And I'm imagining typing, my God, can you imagine a 10-page paper? Sorry for my language, on your phone? Like I can't even wrap my head around it. And it's a regular refrain that we hear from students.
Right.
So it's not abnormal at all.
And we're still hitting on the absence of the community that you were discussing earlier, where so much of our engagement now is online and getting those cultural norms, picking up on little new social trends. All of that adds up to how you feel about yourself, how you feel about yourself as a student, and then obviously having the sort of social capital to land your first job, for example. And even seeing things like, as a student at Berkeley Law, Berkeley's doing Zoom town halls that you can log into just to see people. And if you don't have that ability to just know that you're not alone in feeling like this is a crazy time, that's a really tough circumstance to be in. So
yeah, and it gets even deeper. Sorry, I think I'm interrupting.
No, go for it.
Like we really, at the start of COVID, we were approached by Every Child Oregon, which is a group that works with foster students. And they connected with us because at the very beginning of this, they were like, hey, we have kids who can't connect to a device. And that means that they're not talking to their social worker. They're not talking to their biological parents, and they're not talking to their siblings. And that is a super isolating experience. That's not okay. And on top of that, they weren't able to engage in education. So we're talking about like really pure isolation from all the things around you that matter, and make sure that you feel safe. And that is not acceptable.
No. Well, and so that goes to show just how deep of a need there is and how important it is for people to think what they can do to give back. And so for the person who's listening who says, oh, well, I have a device, what are your kind of threshold questions for whether or not they can donate it? And what is kind of that requirement for folks to help you all out?
Yeah, so I would say if you have a device that's out of use, donate it. We love laptops right now. Laptops with a webcam and a microphone are kind of the sweet spot for us. And if it's something that's a usable piece of technology, obviously it's going to be way better. That said, we are really good at turning even recycled machines into a little bit of income to help support our programs. It's something we've become really adept at. So if you drop off a 10-year-old MacBook, we will try to get it back into use. And if we cannot get it back into use, we will recycle it and try to get a little bit of income out of that so that we can support our programs. And sometimes now that even means buying a couple of new devices to get people so that they have the technology required.
Wow, it's fantastic. And it gives me hope because I know there are folks out there who have that drawer of laptops, right, that have just kind of been discarded. All of it adds up for you all and it all can make an impact. And so with that idea of there being some positivity, being some hope out there, what has inspired you about people's response to COVID? And you mentioned some of the partnerships that are forming and some of the new collaborations that are starting with Free Geek. What's giving you hope these days?
Oh man. I mean, I think the conversation around the digital divide reaching this like peak point is giving me a lot of hope. But I also feel like people are coming together in a way that I never expected. You know, the coronavirus hit and we as an organization were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? How are we going to survive this? What does this mean for our staff? And it felt really, really scary. And lately I've been super inspired by our staff. I know that that's a really campy thing to say, but like they are killing it. Like these people are showing up, working their butts off, trying to make things happen in the community. And like we have people all over the place doing all sorts of insane work. We have volunteers who are trying to help. We have interns who are assisting us. And then we have community partners. I think we've had everyone from salespeople at technology companies to large technology companies to banks to grocery stores asking us if they can host drives for us. So I think that community response has just been so big and such, I've cared about this issue for a long time, and most of the people who work at Free Geek care about this issue, and I think you probably cared about this issue for a long time. And it feels like all of a sudden the world sees the issue, and it's really refreshing and wonderful. It's sad that we had to wait for this to happen for people to care. But I'm thrilled that people are starting to care. And I know that every time we put a computer in a kid's hands, or we had this really sweet letter from a dad who we gave 3 computers to because he has 3 kids who are all in school.
Wow.
And he said, I realize that Free Geek is a nonprofit and somebody donated these computers. And I want that person to know that these computers are changing my life.
Wow.
And that for me is like, that's why we do the work, right?
Right. I mean, and just talking about those doors opening and those opportunities expanding just from a laptop, just from something that was sitting around for someone else now being that key is so incredible. And especially in a spot like Portland where we know we have Intel employees and we have other really tech savvy folks who surely can help out. It's so encouraging to hear that's happening. And I know I speak for a ton of people when I say thank you to Free Geek and to you all for the long hours I know you're putting in and the outreach you're doing.
We are loving it. We are grateful and humbled and honored to do the work. I will also say we are not the only nonprofit refurbisher out there, and I want to shout out to After and the network of people who are like in different areas. So if somebody's not in Portland, the After network is a really great way to connect with refurbishers in your area who maybe you can volunteer with or help with digital divide solutions for. So there are many, many ways to connect, and we are definitely not the only one. I keep hearing stories about like neighborhood kids showing up and like refurbishing devices so that they can get them to other kids in their neighborhood. Like there's so many ways to help with this. And while I would love for Free Geek to be able to solve the whole problem ourselves, that's not ever going to happen. So reach out where you are and see who needs help. And if you have an extra laptop sitting around that works, like clear the data off and get it to somebody who needs it, because I bet you they're out there. So.
They surely are. Well, thanks so much. And really awesome to see you paying it forward to other organizations. I know the digital divide is not just an urban issue. It's definitely a rural issue as well. And in a state like Oregon, there are huge pockets of a lack of connectivity and a lack of device access. So thanks for that encouraging word. And I'll let you get off to the good work you're doing. But thank you so much for joining, Hilary.
Thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it.